Question 4. Many corporations have begun decorating their halls with motivational posters in hopes of boosting their employees' motivation to work productively. However, almost all employees at these corporations are already motivated to work productively, so these corporations' use of motivational posters is unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. All right, so argument or facts, clearly we have an argument. And the conclusion of this passage is that these corporations' use of motivational posters is unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. And how do we know that? Well, almost all employees at these corporations are already motivated to work productively. Okay, so is that a good or bad argument? You notice that this argument makes no sense. His premise is that these employees at these corporations are already motivated to work productively. And because of that, the author then concludes that these corporations' use of motivational posters is unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. Again, what was this intended purpose? Well, they were decorating the halls with these posters in hopes of boosting their employees' motivation to work productively. Boosting. So it's boosting their motivation. So what difference does it make if they're already motivated to work productively? There's nothing that says I cannot still increase their motivation to work productively, right? And so clearly this is a flawed argument. Again, the author is assuming that because these people are already motivated to work productively, that there's no way to make them more motivated to work productively, which clearly doesn't make any sense. And as we proceed to the question stem, the reasoning in the argument is most vulnerable to criticism on the grounds that the argument most vulnerable to criticism. We know this is an errors of reasoning question. So now looking for the answer choice that describes the logical error made by the author in the passage, made in this passage. So let's take a look at A. Fails to consider whether corporations that do not currently use motivational posters would increase their employees' motivation to work productively if they began using the posters. And I guess you could say that's true. He does fail to consider that because this passage is about the corporations that have begun decorating their halls with these posters. Almost all employees at these corporations are already motivated to work. So these corporations' use is unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. So we're only talking about these corporations that have begun decorating their halls with motivational posters, the employees at these corporations, and then our conclusion is about these corporations. So while A is true, it's completely irrelevant because it's not the flaw in the argument. The problem is that among these corporations where we see them decorating these halls to boost employee productivity, the employees at these corporations already motivated to work productively, so the use of these posters is unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. So while A is true, it's irrelevant, not the flaw, because again, we're talking about at these corporations. Which brings me to B. Takes for granted that with respect to their employees' motivation to work productively, corporations that decorate their halls with motivational posters are representative of corporations in general. And again, you notice B does not apply. This is not the problem with this argument because again, we're not talking about corporations in general. We're talking about these corporations. So B again does not apply. It is not the error in reasoning in this passage, so B is out. C fails to consider that even if motivational posters do not have one particular beneficial effect for corporations, they may have similar effects that are equally beneficial. And again, you notice C does not apply because the conclusion of this passage is not that these motivational posters are completely useless. The conclusion is that they are unlikely to achieve its intended purpose. Again, the purpose being boosting employee productivity. So C does not apply because again, we're talking about intended purpose, not whether they serve any purpose. Moving to D, does not adequately address the possibility that employee productivity is strongly affected by factors other than employees' motivation to work productively. And again, D is true but irrelevant. What difference does that make if he fails to adequately address that employee productivity is going to be affected by other factors, that is not the flaw of this argument. The problem with the passage, again, is that we're trying to boost employee motivation to work productively. But because these employees at these corporations are already motivated to work productively, then we cannot achieve this purpose. It's not about whether other factors affect their motivation to work productively. So D again, true but irrelevant, not the problem, not the logical flaw of this passage, which brings me process of elimination to E, fails to consider that even if employees are already motivated to work productively, motivational posters may increase that motivation. And that is exactly the flaw we talked about. Just because they're already motivated to work productively doesn't mean that we can't increase that motivation. So E here describes a logical flaw in the passage, and it would be the correct answer.